Hi everyone, how are you? This week's story is a Roald Dahl story. It's an extract from George's Marvellous Medicine and it's a small part of the story. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get going. So, George Cranky. He lives on a farm with his mother and his father and his grizzly old grandmother with lots of animals. And one day George decides that the medicine that his grumpy old grandma's been taking every day isn't really doing her any good. So he cooks up a very special marvellous medicine instead. And these are some of the things he puts inside. He has golden gloss, hair shampoo, canary seeds, some curry powder and some engine oil. But when he feeds it to his grandmother, it has the most unexpected result. She starts to grow higher and higher and higher until she breaks through the roof of the house. George is so amazed he can't help but wonder about the magical effect the medicine might have on the other inhabitants of the farm. Chapter 1. The Brown Hen.
"Oh, I feel terrific," said George's grandma. "Didn't I tell you I had magic powers? Didn't I warn you I had wizardry at the tips of me fingers? But you wouldn't listen to me, would you? You wouldn't listen to your old grandma."
"You didn't do it, Grandma," George shouted back at her. "I did it. I made a new medicine."
"New medicine? You? What rubbish!" she yelled.
I did, shouted George.
"You're lying as usual. You're always lying," yelled Grandma.
"I'm not lying, Grandma. I swear I'm not." The wrinkled old face high in the roof stared down suspiciously at George.
"Are you telling me you actually made medicine all by yourself?" she shouted.
"Yes, Grandma, all by myself."
"Well, I don't believe you," she answered.
A brown hen was pecking in the yard close to where George was standing. The hen gave him an idea. Quickly he uncorked the medicine bottle and poured some of the brown stuff into a spoon. "Watch this, Grandma," he shouted. He crouched down, holding out the spoon to the hen. "Chicken," he said. "Chick, chick, chicken, come here, have some of this." The chicken thought the spoon was full of corn. It hopped over and it put its head on one side. It looked at the spoon. "Come on, chicken," George said. "Good chicken, chicken." Brown hen stretched out its neck towards the spoon and went pick. It got a beak full of medicine. The effect was electric. Scratched the hen, and it shot straight up into the air like a rocket. It went high as a house. Then it came down to the yard with a splat, and there it sat with its feathers all sticking out straight out of its own body. There was the look of amazement on its face. George stood watching it. Grandma was on the roof watching it too. The hen got on its feet. It was rather shaky and making a funny gurgling noise through its throat. Its beak was opening and shutting, and it seemed to be looking a pretty sick hen.
"You've done it in, you stupid boy," Grandma shouted. "That hen's gonna die, and your father'll be after you now. Serves you right."
All of a sudden, black smoke started pouring out of the hen's beak.
"It's on fire!" Grandma yelled. "The hen's on fire!"
George ran to the water trough and got a bucket of water.
That hen will be roasted and ready for eating at any moment," Grandma shouted.
George splashed the bucket of water over the hen. Then there was a sizzling sound. Tss, and the smoke went away.
"Old hen's laid its last egg," Grandma shouted. "Hens don't do any laying after they've been on fire."
Now that the fire was out, the hen seemed better. It stood up properly and it flapped its wings. Then it crouched down low to the ground as though it was getting ready to jump. It did jump. It jumped high in the air and turned a complete somersault and landed back on its feet.
"It's a circus hen!" shouted Grandma from the rooftop. "It's a flipping acrobat!"
Now the hen began to grow. George had been waiting for this to happen. "It's growing!" he yelled. "It's growing! Grandma, look, it's growing!" Bigger and bigger, taller and taller, it grew. Soon the hen was 4 or 5 times its normal size. "Can you see it, Grandma?" George shouted.
"I can see it, boy," the old girl shouted. "I'm watching it."
George was hopping about from one foot to another with excitement, pointing at the enormous hen and shouting, "It's had magic medicine, Grandma, and it's growing just like you did." But there was a difference between the way the hen was growing and the way that Grandma grew. When Grandma grew taller and taller, she got thinner and thinner. The hen didn't. It seemed to stay nice and plump all around. Soon it was taller than George, but that didn't stop there. It went right on growing till it was about as big as a horse. Then it stopped. "Doesn't it look marvellous, Grandma?" shouted George.
"It's not as tall as me," Grandma said. "Compared to me, that hen's a titchy small. I'm the tallest of them all."
At that moment, George's mother came back from shopping in the village. She drove her car into the yard and she got out. She was carrying a bottle of milk in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. First thing she saw was a gigantic brown hen towering over little George, and she dropped the bottle of milk. Then Grandma started shouting at her from the rooftop, and when she looked up and she saw Grandma's head sticking out through the tiles, she dropped the bag of groceries.
"How about that then, eh, Mary?" Grandma shouted. "I bet you've never seen a hen as big as that. That's George's giant hen, that is." But, stammered George's mother. "It's George's magic medicine," Grandma shouted. "We've both of us had it, the hen and I."
"But how in the world did you get on that roof?" cried Mother.
"Oh, I didn't," cackled the old woman. "My feet are standing on the floor in the living room."
This was too much for George's mother to understand, and she goggled and she gasped and she looked as if she was going to faint. A second later, George's father appeared. His name was Mr. Killiecrankie. Mr. Cranky was a small man with bandy legs and a huge head. He was a kind father to George, but he was not an easy person to live with because even the smallest of things worked him up. The hen standing in the yard was certainly not a small thing, and when Mr. Cranky saw it, he started jumping so something was burning his feet. "Oh, great heavens!" he cried, waving his arms. "What's this? What's happened? Where did it come from? It's a giant hen. Who did it?" "I did," George said.
"Look at me!"
Grandma shouted from the rooftop. "Never mind about the hen."
"What about me?"
Mr. Cranky looked up and saw the Grandma. "Shut up, Grandma," he said. It didn't seem to surprise him that the old girl was sticking her head through the roof. It was the hen that excited him the most. He'd never ever seen anything like it. But then, who had? Tomorrow I will read you the next part of the story. Have a good day. Goodbye.